And we're moving on to the round table now. Quite a few of this up here, as you can see. I'm just going to introduce myself very briefly in the panel, and then we'll move on to some questions. I'll take a few questions, which the panel will answer, and then I'll open the floor to everyone. So my name is Sheree Palmer. I am a member of, I work for Kent Law School as a Student Success Project Officer. So my role is basically to work to close the attainment gap. Sorry, I think that might be better. Is that better? Okay. So my role is to close the attainment gap for certain groups of students with protected characteristics to make sure that every student has the capacity to reach their full potential. So that's something obviously the university is investing in, and my role is specifically related to Kent Law School. Okay, so to my left we have Ahmed. We have the president of who is a postgraduate student. We have the president of the Kent Union, Aaron Thompson. I'm Arday at Deco, who is our VP for Welfare. We have Elsie, who is a law student, Evangeline. I'm sorry, I don't actually know what you study.
Social sciences.
Social sciences, thank you. Then we have, to my right, Dr. Francesca Sobande, who is a lecturer in the Faculty of Marketing and Advertising at the University of Cardiff. Dr. Deborah Gabriel, who is a senior academic at the University of Bournemouth, whose work is largely around embedding social justice and equality into teaching, research and professional practice.
Let's make sure you say Black British academics, because that comes before Bournemouth.
Black British academic,
yes,
senior
founder
academic.
of Black British academics.
Yeah. She recently visited the Medway campus to deliver some work on the 3D pedagogy framework, looking at how to decolonise, democratise and diversify the higher education curriculum. And she's co-editor with Sheree and Tate of the groundbreaking book called Inside the Ivory Tower, Narratives of Women of Colour, Surviving and Thriving in British Academia.
That's enough, that's enough.
That's enough. I can go into lots of detail about every single person, so this is a very, very, very positive history, forgive me. And then we have, sorry, I'm terrible with names here. Jasmine to my right, also Usnan as well, and Joy, who are people who've helped us by running focus groups. Dr. Jason Arday as well, who's kindly visited us before, who launched the project for us. He used to be senior lecturer at Roundtable Institute and is now a senior teaching fellow at the University of Warwick. And at the end we have Kieran as well, who's worked with us and helped lead the focus group. So that's our panel. Okay, so I'm just going to open up the floor to questions. First of all, I'll take a few and then put this to the panel. So just raise your hand if you have a question.
What are the initial challenges you have had to sort of conceptualize this?
Thank you. Okay, so what were the initial challenges that the panel have had to conceptualising their ideas around
sort of decolonizing curriculum?
Initial challenges.
Oh, sorry, I'm just going to take a few questions first. And then we'll answer them together.
No, this is more for the students, really. I just want to know how we can support you better, you know? Like, what can we do, what has worked, what hasn't worked? What do you need from academics, from, support staff, from all of us, in order to help you guys, continue flourishing? Because you're doing it. You're doing it right now.
How has the response been from other students? So you guys are doing great work, but how do you get other students to mobilise? How have they responded to what you're doing?
Okay. We'll start with those questions. So just to recap, so the first question was, what are the initial challenges, thank you, to conceptualising ideas around decolonising curriculum? Secondly, how can we support students? What do you need from us as academics, professional services, members of the university, and support staff in order to help you to flourish? And finally, what has the response been from other students, and how can we mobilise other students? So if I start off by going straight to, actually, would like to answer that.
So what were the difficulties? Well, I'll begin pretty
Wait, sorry.
For me, I think the difficulties, I was scared, especially looking at how the activists from KCL, how they've been treated. I thought that would happen to us. Just, speaking out and trying to not be too, because I'm very radical, so trying to tone myself down and trying to find the middle ground in like where we can begin was a challenge for me. And yeah, that was challenging for me. That was a difficulty that I faced. I don't know if anybody else wants to speak on their difficulties or.
One big challenge for me was that we didn't know where to start. There was so much that we needed to change. There's so much that needs to be developed, and more initiatives need to be taken. It was that structure. Where do we start? The manifesto. We were so confused. Like, what do we need to add to it? What is something that's very important? And through the focus groups, through like the different activities that we did, we came to understand what we had to do and what was the most important thing.
So second, we'll just finish the first question first.
I'd like to say something which
I'd like to say something about that.
Okay, so what I'd like to say really is a cautionary note, is that, when people are launching these, much needed decolonising spaces and initiatives, there's a lot of excitement and talk as if you can flick a switch to decolonise. I so loved Dr. Karen Salt's talk, because she kind of warned of some of the pitfalls. And I think that the first thing I'd like to really say is that you can't decolonise the curriculum without decolonising the institutions. The curriculum doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's part of institutional, powerful, marketised structure. And unless you're able to decolonise the institution, you won't decolonise the curriculum. And I think that in order to do justice to the momentum that's building, to the hopes of the students that are working so hard and radically, to change the environment for yourselves, that you have to recognise it needs to be go beyond just looking at the curriculum to looking at the people that teach in it. And I think that what I'm seeing is that a lot of institutions, because of trying to attract and recruit students, and we know that predominantly students of colour make up a larger proportion of their populations attending university. And so institutions are motivated to window dress, let's say, to attract their students and talk about decolonising, when actually what's happening is kind of very piecemeal approach. And I think that what also needs to be recognised is, in as much as you want to diversify the curriculum, you want different perspectives, you have to think about who's going to deliver those perspectives. You can't decolonise the curriculum without creating cultural competence amongst predominantly white staff that haven't been motivated. And that certainly was a consideration for me, because I'm at Bournemouth University, which is a predominantly white institution in a predominantly white part of England. And just to give you an example, I'm one of 17 black academic staff. That's 17 out of 800. So you tell me how you would fare working in that environment. You cannot, unless you have a community and a constituency of people that you can draw on and network with. and you must have a collective identity. So that's why I developed the 3D pedagogy framework, because I couldn't possibly be the only person to decolonize the curriculum and be the one that's coming up with new models for teaching. It will wreck you. So I thought, no, I'm not going to fix the problems that I didn't create. So I came up with that framework so that white academics and lecturers would have a model and a critical practice and pedagogy, so that they could actually do what they're paid to do, which is actually teach a diverse student body. But I think that you also have to recognise that it's not all just about the students. You have to think about us, the black academics, as well, because often we get overstretched because we're seen as the ones that are going to engage with all the students of colour. I have students that come into me that they're not my students in my class, they're not my dissertation students, and yet they're crying out and they're coming to me because they're not getting the correct supervision, and they're not being taught by staff that have critical understandings around race. And it's a real dilemma for me, because I don't want to turn them away, because I want them to have equal opportunity to do well. But then again, I'm only one person, and you become physically exhausted. So I think that when you're thinking about decolonising the curriculum, that this should be in the forefront of your mind. And that's one of the biggest challenges. It's creating the cultural competence amongst the teaching body to be able to deliver this curriculum. And I know I probably said, talk for too long, but I just wanted to leave that thought in your mind.
Great. Can we go to Dr. Sobande? Okay, can we go back down to Dr.
Yeah, I'll keep it very brief. For some quick context, I think I probably confused people in that I had an institutional change midway through the development of this programme. So I was in a business school setting for about 4 or 5 years between studying my PhD and working as a lecturer, and I'm now a digital media studies lecturer at Cardiff University, just going into my 3rd week. But I think something that I guess I've become very aware of is how conversations to do with decolonising the academy can look and feel very different in different disciplinary spaces. And something that's been quite, I guess, interesting for me to think about.
I'll project my voice. Something that's been pretty interesting to think about and speak about with other people. Right, so it's basically having had the experience of being an undergrad in sociology and politics, finding myself somehow in a business school setting, but essentially looking at issues to do with media and culture and the experiences of black women in Britain in relation to media, and then finding myself moving from the business school setting that I was once in. Sometimes I feel that it's those spaces that think they're particularly right on in terms of their politics, and that can be less likely to actually do the resistant work that they claim to be about. So I'm not saying that I think business schools are doing anything radically different, but I think that what we need to reflect on critically is, even if we feel that we're doing better than a different discipline, even if the conversations are moving at a more progressive pace within the liberal arts, social sciences, the humanities, that doesn't mean the job's done. And I think, to just really echo a lot of what's already been said today, it's about putting these words into practice and recognising that just because perhaps within a sociology department we see more black and brown faces and we're speaking about this more, it doesn't necessarily mean that the decolonial work is happening. And the main thing I really want to say is that this stuff, just to echo what already has been said by other people, it needs to be about us supporting the students, and it needs to be about not asking them to come and help in this sort of consultancy capacity where their work is exploited. And this is labour intensive, and this needs to go beyond us just providing praise and clapping. And I think it's, Aziza who's already spoken about this is about how we can help them, and quite often that's about handing over platforms and about moving beyond this surface level praise.
Thank you.
I guess kind of it's already been touched on, but a fear that I had was also just co-opting the term, because decolonizing has become kind of a trendy thing to just slap on different movements. And so I guess from the beginning is just making sure that we're not just picking something up and not staying true to what it is fundamentally, and also just like what she mentioned, you can't really decolonize a curriculum and you're in a very white supremacist institution. So yeah, and as someone who's an international, a Black international student, I'm very distrusting of these institutions. So just ensuring that we maintain those conversations on how we can go beyond just decolonizing the curriculum, and when you're bringing people in, you're bringing them into a space that you're already actively working on to make it safer and more conducive for learning.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. How's everyone doing? You all well? Good. Everyone looks so morbid. First things first, I was going to say to Dave, Sheree and Suhraiya and the collective, you lot put on an unbelievable show, and really there's a beauty and freedom in what you lot do that I feel at this stage in my career I'm not always allowed to do, so it's refreshing to kind of see what you lot are doing, and you're amazing. I just think it's really important that people, I think the hardest thing in academia, I think, is when people, that's very, very difficult and make it look very easy. And you've got, I don't know how many PhDs you've got in there, but you lot make it look so easy, and it's a privilege to be in your company, so thank you very much to all of you for that. The first thing I wanted to say just briefly, and it's a kind of random parable, but I was fortunate yesterday to go for dinner with a very close friend of mine, Dr. Remy Joseph Salisbury, and we were talking about kind of the academy generally speaking, and one of the things that's kind of really interesting is this idea of being in this space. Amongst all of this, these things are really, really pertinent, but sometimes we forget how lucky we are to have the agency to be able to change certain things. So while I recognise that certain types of people maintain and hold certain types of power, I suppose you need to be at the table to be able to do some damage, right? And I think the most important thing is that in this space, we are actually at the table where we can influence change. We have a type of autonomy, a type of agency. Is it ever going to be to the extent of a middle class white male? Or probably not. But we live in hope, and the hope is that we can kind of change that space. And I actually think of this space as being in a privileged position. I just think, in terms of kind of thinking about that, one of the things that's really important is really thinking about, there's a vanity in academia that I can't stand, and actually in many ways, because of the nature of it, its sole purpose is actually to divide and conquer, particularly for people of colour. And one thing that I think is really, really powerful, Aziz kind of touched on this really poignantly, is what can we do for students? How can we mobilise the next generation of academic activists to go on and to keep this going? Ideally, we don't want this to be a problem, 20 years from now. But interestingly, when the government were talking about the BAME attainment gap, one of the things that Theresa May said is they're going to take 20 years to close the attainment gap. And I remember sitting there listening to this, and I was like, my daughter will be 32 in 20 years. I'll be nearly 54, sadly. And my son will be 24. I could be a granddad by then. So I was thinking in my head, 20 years, if everything went to plan, touch wood, my daughter might decide to go to university, but still might be at a disadvantage with this attainment gap. So 20 years is obviously too long. So I do think that we all collectively need to think about, in our own positions, reflectively, what we can do to mobilise this fantastic collective in terms of what they do going forward. Because I think the more people we have to mobilise this agenda, I think the more powerful it is. And as I said, what you lot are doing at Kent is not just fantastic here, it's sector leading. It's sector leading, that's a huge thing.
I think one of the things that you guys, teachers, academic staff, could do for us is to make a conscious effort to make us feel comfortable to speak, and also to put effort. So, like with the session before this, to put a conscious effort into educating teachers to make sure that they know how to approach students of colour, non-European students. So I think if you create the space for it to be, and also that your minds are also, working towards becoming decolonised, that then we will feel more comfortable coming to you for help, because I feel like there's a large barrier in between us and you guys, so I feel like you guys, not you guys, or a lot of teachers lack the ability to come down to our level and see from our perspective, and also to empathise, to feel what we can feel. Like, you can sympathise, but I don't feel like, from my experience and for a number of other students' experience from the focus groups as well, they don't feel comfortable enough to communicate. Like, for example, from one of my focus groups I held, I remember a student saying that he was an intellectual student. Sorry, I'm talking too fast. He said that he felt uncomfortable talking from his perspective and saying his experiences, because he felt like he would derail the conversation to another, like he'd take it off the road, because it wasn't the Eurocentric perspective that was provided in his class, and that's a problem. A student shouldn't have to feel uncomfortable to come to the university to discuss his experiences. So yeah, that's what I feel like you guys can do, just to make a conscious effort to come down to our level and to educate yourselves as well, so that we can feel comfortable coming to you guys. So, yeah.
Hey, how I think that staff and lecturers can support us better. I'd say keep giving us advice, because we're sort of, I guess you have much more experience in it than us, so just sort of keep telling us and we'll sort of select what you want to take from that. But also, I like the fact that Suhraiya was interacting with us on Twitter, and because a lot of the things on our manifesto we were already talking about on Twitter, and loads of other university students are talking about it and getting things trending and stuff, and half of our academic staff don't even know what's going on Twitter. So sort of maybe getting on Twitter and sharing what we're doing, or just looking at what we're doing, and you'll sort of gain a larger understanding of, I guess, a more in-depth analysis of what we want to do. But what else? I'm an engineering student, and I know that when I came to university, we were mostly sort of greeted by white members of staff, and sort of we didn't really know who the staff of colour were, and we didn't really know what their politics were. We weren't sure whether we could talk to them about something involving a race issue or something, or whether they were gonna just sort of give us the same stuff that the white members of staff were giving us. So sort of let us know that you are politically where we are, so that because say if we go to you with our an issue on something and you give us something that a white member of staff is going to give us, it can be even more isolating to us, and yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much. I think Arday wanted to speak to the first question, which was just going back to initial challenges to conceptualising ideas around decolonising curriculum.
Well, I kind of wanted to speak to sort of across the board all of them and some of the things, and just pick some of the things in terms of Aziz's question. And one of the things that I really want, and this is coming back to Professor Karen's talk and the earlier session we had on decolonizing research, which was what are the guiding principles for research. And the first thing that this document of guiding principles that Professor Karen Saul kind of passed along with her collective that they're talking about is pay your laborers their labor. So this comes down to, so I do understand the idea of, and this is again thinking about pitfalls, I do understand the idea of what can staff do, but be very careful of how you frame that what can staff do. In terms of the staff of color, we're all with you here with you, right? But remember that when we're here with you, it's very easy for the university and the institution to pin it down to some brown and black staff and be like, you take all the labor and not pay us a penny. So our issue is your issue as well. You have to remember that. That's one massive pitfall. Then comes the idea of cultural competence. Now it's about creating that idea that white staff who may be on a permanent contract, who you know have more privileges, they have more of a burden to think about when they're constructing modules or whatever they're doing in their everyday kind of interactions, is to be self-reflective at that point, and whoever's here in terms of why stuff, be self-reflective, what is it exactly that I'm doing? And that's incredibly important. And that shouldn't all be the burden on the black or brown staff members, of which we don't see a lot of. That's the truth. We don't see a lot of this. So it's just about when you're then coming back to the idea of, well, what does decolonizing curriculum mean? It should be a broader thing. And as was said, it should be a broader thing. It is about the fact of what is the mental well-being of not just the students, but also the staff who are taking in so much work and being underpaid for it. So this is really important to think when you're thinking about decolonization. It's very important to, for me, it was very important to think about it. Is this just about kind of making a buzzword? Is it just about what can a staff directly just do? But are there more institutional, kind of very nefarious, really exploitative institutional structures at place that we should be questioning? So that was just, yeah, that's just what I wanted to say. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think we can now move on to, thank you very much for the questions and some answers. Can we move on to the second question? How can we support you, and what do you need from academics, support staff and university staff in order to flourish? I know we've just been talking about not using students purely using their labour and ideas, but it'd be great just to get an indication from you of the things that you think are missing, what we can do to improve. So who would like to start? Should we start with some of the students? Aaron, would you like to comment on that? Or Ronaldo?
So what can academics do to help us be successful, I guess? Let's be real. Everyone in this room, I guess, wants a decolonized institution, but there are going to be academics who don't. There are going to be academics who think that, well, they are very busy and don't want to give the time to do this project, won't see it as a priority, and so on. So I would ask that those academics in the room be our ally. I know you're already black and brown, but be our ally in the actual institution, because we as students, we can push from the bottom, but you are in the institution, you can push from the inside essentially. So don't have to get involved in every single project, but talk to your colleagues, talk to those white members of staff and say, hey, are you doing anything on this? Why not? And actually challenge their positions, challenge their issues, challenge their mindset, and make sure that they see it as a priority, because I as a president, I work closely with the university, and the university recognise that that recruitment is down, period. They recognise that students want value for money, they want a lot of stuff. And I believe, I don't know if other people believe it, but academics aren't tailoring their product, tailoring their institution, tailoring their courses to the students. They're teaching something that is fundamentally outdated. They don't know how to teach students of black and brown backgrounds, but they need to understand what it is they need, how they can access stuff, and how they learn. Because I think we learn differently, but they don't understand that. They don't want to change stuff because some of them are centered in the old ways of doing stuff. But they have to improve, they have to change, they have to recognize that we are different people, we are a different generation, and we need fundamentally different stuff to be better and be as successful as our white counterparts.
Thank you very much. Ronaldo, if you wanted to add to that?
I think Aaron kind of said it all, but the only thing that was kind of going through my mind through everything that everyone said was us as students also holding academics to account. I feel like there isn't really a fire under them to actually decolonize the curriculum. They don't feel like there's a need from students to decolonize the curriculum. And I do think us as students need to also mobilize our white counterparts as well to show that it's important to have a decolonized curriculum, why it's important as well at this university, a university that brands itself as the European University of the UK, why it's so important. We need to have these discussions here. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay. I've just been asked just to comment, following on from the comments around using students' labour, that we're not so much asking the students right now just to fix the system for us like that, but we're trying to understand what it is that students feel has worked well so far, or perhaps what hasn't been so effective. So we can do more of what's working well and actually try to change what isn't so effective. So who would like to speak to that? Any of our other students would like to comment?
point us into? Like, how can we sort of...
Sorry, is this another question? Or?
No, just to add on to that. In a sense, how can we...
I just want to add is like, in a sense, how can we sort of even financially support you to spread the news, spread the information, or build up your team and or the skills that you need. For example, giving public talks, and you were brilliant at it already, but like how can we help that way? You know, either skill-wise or financially. You know, I think that's all important. That we all, you know, you don't just run on your own money, right? So how can we help you? Any like K-Union, would you support them, or having any pots for them, or how can we donate, or some other form of support?
Do you mean in relation to students involved in the project, or do you mean
in relation
students
to
in
the project?
Okay, in relation to the project. Okay, so
Because that, like, we can spread to other universities.
So linking into that, I mean that's a very difficult question for us to go into in terms of financial support. It's kind of a wider question, but I think the interesting thing there is about perhaps thinking about maybe skills that we could help you to develop to help you be more effective in supporting the project. Come on, comment on that. Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to talk about some work that I'm doing through Black British academics and through consultancy with other institutions. Now, I've been working with other institutions, including University of Kent, trying to embed the 3D pedagogy framework into teaching and learning, because as I said, you can't decolonise the curriculum unless you've got the staff that have the cultural competence to do so. Now, at one of the institutions that I've been working at, a couple of years ago, I chaired a strategic review that was looking at equality and diversity in the curriculum, and I made a few recommendations. And one of the things that they've taken forward, which I think is a resourced way for students to be involved, is they created an elective as part of the degree programme, and the elective is about decolonising the curriculum. And so students at level 5 can opt to take this unit in which they feed into the teaching and learning strategy. And so I had developed a workshop through Black British Academics for students. In fact, I did run it here. Dave's busy talking, but I ran it here, didn't I? I ran the base workshop here, so there was a group of students, and they each had a different area of, I guess, decolonising the curriculum to focus on in their groups. And then the ideas that they came up with are ideas that are taken forward. So at this institution, the students were all looking at different areas: pedagogy, social justice, sense of belonging, things like that. And they worked as a group, and this was across institutions. So students that hadn't worked together were in groups, focusing on coming up with ideas based on what they actually already learn, thinking about, well, how can we embed race and ethnicity and culture and criticality? What kind of things can we do? So just to give you an example, this was in a kind of arts and media institution. So take, for example, a student that does graphic design or television or something like that. And so I guess the guidance that I gave them was that the best way to diversify is in the context, because it's often the context is lacking. So I said, well, imagine that you were learning television and your assignment was to do a documentary. I said you could get students focused on social justice if you set them an assignment where they had to explore race or racism in society. So at the end of this elective, it was a week-long intensive assignment. Different people came in, gave talks. The Vice-Chancellor was there to encourage the students, everything else. What they come up with, they did a group presentation and a report, all putting forward their ideas, specific ideas for how to diversify, decolonise the curriculum. And the head of teaching and learning is going to take up some of these ideas, so it will feed into the teaching and learning. Now, students, it's resourced. It's resourced in terms of, obviously, they're bringing in people, experts to deliver this, which means they're taking care of the funding because they're paying for these people. The students get the luxury of, working alongside people that they don't know, making recommendations. A lot of their feedback was that they got a lot out of it by talking with other students. It was a mixed kind of multicultural group, so a lot of the white students were learning from the students of colour that were sharing for the first time some of their experiences of the curriculum. And for me, obviously, again, it's already allocated, you already allocated time. A lot of the issues is that you have to do all extra work outside your existing studies, which means you have an extra burden. You're fixing a problem that you didn't create. So I think that where possible, if you can decolonise within existing structures, then it's resourced and it's less of a burden. So that's just one suggestion for how you can get that support. Encourage, and through your student union power, make suggestions for things like this, because it benefits the institution when they can boast and say, well, we've got this elective where students, we're not telling them, students are decolonising the curriculum themselves. Because I think it's important that we can't fix everything. I'm hearing that there's so much demands here in terms of, we want this, it sounds like a shopping list. And you have to appreciate that most of us black academics, right, we are so overburdened, overstretched, overworked and underpaid. And that's why I had to embed my scholar activism into my academic role. I simply could not do it. So part of my workload hours, 180 hours a year, is allotted to work through Black British academics doing teaching, research and professional practice. And we're so overburdened with admin work, with demands, with deadlines, with targets. So I try to help students and change the environment and tackle racial inequality through my teaching, through my research, and through my professional practice that is all focused on race equality and social justice. And that's the best way that I can help you, because if you go to most academics and they don't have that existing time, it's not that they don't want to help you. It's not that they don't want to help you, it's just that they're trying to keep pace with a workload that they have and then giving extra things on top of that. So it's not that they don't want to help you, which is why I try to work strategically through the role that I'm already paid to do. It's just that I'm directing it towards these things. And one thing I'll say about students of colour at my university, Bournemouth, despite the fact that we have quite a low proportion, maybe about 10% students of colour, but politically they are extremely powerful, and I'm so proud of them because for the fourth year in a row, we have a Black Student Union president and 4 Black Student Union officers, and they have really changed the environment and the landscape and the attitude amongst the university leadership towards race equality. At the moment, they've got a campaign going, Why is my curriculum white? They've been supportive of me and I've been supportive of them, and we've done a lot of things together. And I think that that's how academics can support students and students support academics, so that, together we can really make a difference.
Thank you so much. Okay, additional question?
Yes,
Thomas first.
Thank you very much to the excellent panel. I just want to ask a question, and I've got two academics in the room in mind who possibly could answer this question. I'm just I'm thinking about the 3-year cycle, student cycle, generally. So undergraduate students are here at the university generally for 3 years, right? And in relation to institutional memory. So you're doing brilliant work now, but you're still within this 3-year cycle. So you leave in 2 years or so, And then does the institution have a capacity to remember this work, right? And sustain it. But I'm also thinking about that in the context of this, what I'll call a double deficit. So students of color are talking about their sense of belonging and how that compromises their sense of agency because of the narrow perspectives and the institutional structures. But it's almost a paradox because academics also feel this lack of sense of belonging. You know, we see that in works like Professor Dr. Nicola Rollock, where she talks about the sense of belonging amongst academics. So with this paradox in mind, the 3-year cycle, the double deficit, I would think, in sense of belonging, what are the practical strategies that you think institutions could really try to implement to mitigate against these factors? So I'm thinking about someone who has done a lot of work in this area, Dr. Jason Arday and Dr. Les Henry. So I'm wondering if we can get their perspectives on this as well. So let's not put you on the spot, sorry.
I'll take another question as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you want me to answer that now? Do you want me to address it now, or are you taking another question?
I'll just take another question if it's related.
Hi. It's a little bit related. I'm just really interested by the idea of the Kaleidoscope Hub in your manifesto as a space of getting support, but also having a space that's able to support continued organisation as a way of responding to that. So I was interested by how that idea came about and what the hopes were for that space. And because it requires like resource, like how has that suggestion been received, I guess?
Okay, thank you very much. So if we can go back to Mr. Thomas's question, which is about, and I'll direct it to Dr. Arday. Does someone else have another question?
I'll stand because I don't really want to use that
okay,
fuzzy
practical strategy.
Right. So my name's Les Henry. I'm an associate professor in the School of Law and Criminology, University of West London. Firstly, what Deborah was talking about, we call it emotional labour, and because we're black, we're almost like a magnet to the students, and the academics actually recognise that, and they do burden us as black staff with that because they know what's going on, and especially now that they're talking about broaching academic attitudes to mental health, you're going to see this is going to be a big deal. That's one thing. The second thing is I think we need to be really careful about who we see as allies. Because oftentimes, just because someone has a black face does not mean that they're going to share the same political perspective with you. Point in question, when I got hounded out of Goldsmiths College 2005, I have no shame in saying it because I write about it anyway. My third year students, who would be my third year students at the time, were saying to me, "Oh, Les, who's going to do our supervise our dissertations?" I sent them to Professor Les Back, who's white, and not the 5 black members of staff, because I did not trust them to have the cultural competence to deal with my black students. So I think sometimes we need to be a little bit careful around that. The third thing I'm going to say is I've been at University of West London for 5 years. I was invited to a conference last year in Birmingham, and it's like our, the attainment, the thing you mentioned, that attainment, BAME, whatever it is. So they invited me to go to this conference, and I didn't know why, because I do a lot of outreach work. And Deborah, we did a lot of outreach work years ago. We used to run summer schools, all kinds of stuff. Fundraise ourselves, and we'd run them in the community, as well as whatever we would say we're doing academically. Okay. So because I do a lot of outreach work, I was invited to this conference in Birmingham. When I went to the conference, I'm sitting in there, and it was about the student attainment project, it's called, and it's University of West London, I think it's Derby and Southampton, but don't quote me. I think it's those 3 units. Anyway, I'm in there, and they said, "Oh, the reason why we've invited Dr. Les, because it's what they call me, is because he has no BAME attainment gap, and he's never had one." So that's why they invited me there. I didn't know that, because when it comes to the stats and numbers, they will tell you, well, we'll skip over that. Into all that crunching. So they were saying to me, what do I do? So in some ways to address what Dave said, because I also work with unis doing so-called institutional racism, unconscious bias, all that kind of stuff. I do that. But how I think you embed it and how you decolonize is if you have the wherewithal or the nous, and you're teaching a course, and you know there are black or brown or whatever it is people who are in the same field, put them in. That's how it maintains its own dynamic. That's why I don't have a BAME attainment gap. So I introduce my students to criminologists like Professor Ben Bowling. They'd never heard of him. And if they had heard of him, they didn't know he was black. So what do? Put a video on. That's what I do. Or I will use other academics that I know represent the same, let's say, philosophical outlook, intellectual underpinnings, conceptual frameworks, but they just happen to look like me or the other so-called, and I hate to keep the colour thing, I have to tell you, the other people who don't happen to be in the manner of the dominant class and caste. And I think also we should always premise our conversations on the fact that this is an inherently racist, classist and sexist society. It hasn't changed. So we can talk about decolonizing the curriculum, we can talk about decolonizing an institution, but if we don't decolonize society, we might as well forget it. So, thank you. I hope
Hey, yeah, just to kind of echo what Dr. Henry said, it makes some really interesting points there. I think the first part of Dave's question, I think Dr. Henry's answered, articulated superbly well. I suppose what I want to focus on is the kind of second part of the question around belonging, and in particular, student-centred belonging. So earlier on, I kind of made a point about next generation of kind of academics and kind of bridging the gap in terms of kind of activism, academia, changing that space. And I think one of the things that's really important is there's a lot of secrets in academia. And I remember someone once explaining it to me and saying, Jason, the one thing you need to learn about academia is think of academia as getting to the train station. So I was like, oh. They were like, if there's 5 points those directions, they'll only give you 2. And they'll say, when you get down to the bottom of the road, park someone for more directions, even though they know the information. So people, generally speaking, can be quite economical, this information, and it's systematically and systemically disadvantaged black students who have always had the potential to go on to be academics. So it's knowing those things at year 1. So for example, I don't know how many students I've met in my life, white students, that are invited on research projects in their second year.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They get their name on a paper before they've even written their dissertation. They write their dissertation gets published, and then they get on to a postdoctoral, studentship. By the time they're 23, they walk into this kind of paved with gold street academia type thing. And you kind of think, how does that keep recurring? How does that keep happening? And one of the things that I think is really important in that sense of belonging is really the message we give to students in the first time they get to university. So Anthony, I'm not sure if he's still here, but he made a really good point about that message during induction week. And one of the things that I've kind of always thought that I have a responsibility to do is to tell the students the secrets from the minute they get in. Right. So I had one particular student who said to me, when I was working at Leeds Beckett, said to me, I want to be a PE teacher, Jason. And he was an Asian student, and I said to him, you want to be a PE teacher? I said, anyone can do that. He's like, why are you saying that? You teach on a PE degree. I was a PE teacher, but the school knows GCSEs. A lot of people can do it. And I said, why don't you think about becoming an academic? He's like, I can't do that. No, I'm the first person in my family to go to uni. Where I'm from, everyone goes to prison. I said, okay, well, there are factors that lend itself to that. But actually, if we plot a route, I'm fairly certain you could go to university. 4 years later, that student's doing an MSc, he's about to finish his MSc in social research at University of Leeds. And they've just got onto a PhD studentship. And the point that I make about that is that to that student, that wasn't even a possibility. It wasn't even a possibility. And the thing that becomes really important is the message you give to particularly young black scholars at a young age, because they have all this intelligence and all this agency. And because, for want of a better term, they're at the behest of white academics, who I think a lot of the time throw them off the scent. because I've seen it in school. When I was a school teacher, young black boy says, I want to be a scientist. Black teacher says, so white teacher says to them, I think you'd be really good at sport or music. They're throwing them off the scent. And as soon as you're thrown off the scent, you don't actually believe, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I can only do music and I can only do sport. You don't actually think to yourself, you can do other things. And I know it's a bit hard to hear, but that's how it is. And I think importantly, we have a lot of students here who have the capacity to go on to be the next generation of academics, and not only be academics, but be world leading in their area. And when we take race seriously, and we tell students at the get-go, you can go on, you can do this, and we give them the route to do it, they're more than capable of doing it. And until everyone gets on board with that, I think that's problematic. Because as Dr. Henry has said, there are also people of colour who can be economical. And my own experience in academia is that I have come across people of colour who, when I've asked them for help, they haven't always been generous with their help. I think that's the nicest way I can word it.
That's right.
So I think there's also that as well. It's important we acknowledge that as well. But we're talking about students here who are negotiating an already racialised education system. They get through all of that to get to university. If they can try and traverse all of that and then get to university and still leave with 2-1s first, pay to do self-funded masters, pay to do self-funded PhDs. Imagine if you actually give them the route, what they could do.
I just wanted to really quickly return to an earlier question about how you can help students from a financial perspective. I was going to say I didn't really know anything about Decolonise UKC because no one ever came to the engineering department and spoke to us about it. It's sort of really just stayed in the law school, and so I'd say advertise in arts and English and maths and all engineering stuff and also bring in speakers of color from those different areas of study as well, and not just a lawyer or because definitely in STEM we're always told well, from what I've seen anyway, in terms of computer science and engineering, they're always just cis-het white men. They're always just Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison. Sort of bring in speakers that represent us, are women of color from the LGBTQ community. Definitely let us know that we're out there. It's not just the same faces.
So I'm going to have to stop you there, Kit. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's fantastic. I'm just conscious of the time because we should be finishing in about 5 minutes. So I know Dr. Sobande wants to make a comment, and I'm going to move on to the other two. Sorry, Dr. Sobande. No. Sorry. So I'm going to move on to the other two questions. We are going to have the reception and final stand at 4:45. So obviously, if you have more questions, you can catch up with any of our speakers then. Also, at 6:30, between 6:30 and 8, we have the Cultural Food Festival over in Rutherford Dining Hall. If you're not sure where that is, like most of us, if you're not sure where that is, we can direct you over there as well. So if I could just have a response.
Try and keep this fairly brief if possible. One of the things that I just kept thinking about this last 10-15 minutes or so is that we often treat being a student and an academic or member of staff as an oppositional binary, whereas when I think about a lot of the work that I've seen fantastic people do, it's been at the point where they've been teaching and they've also been studying, whether that's as PhD students or graduate students or whatever. So I think part of what we really need to be doing is thinking about these things much more joint up and not treating sort of academics over here and students over there, because at the end of the day, scholarship doesn't just happen from top down. And the other thing I just wanted to say, which I'm not saying anything that hasn't already been said, and I wanted to, I guess, connect it to what Dr. Karen Salk was speaking about earlier, is that we need to be aware of the fact that not everybody can do this work, not everybody will be able to do this work in the way that we expect, and sometimes people need to experience a sense of centeredness and beingness, And I think that as much as we talk about wanting this to be student-led and wanting to be able to support students, I can't speak on behalf of students at this point, because I'm no longer one, but sometimes that support is not expecting them to do some of the stuff that we expect them to do, and saying that, you know, sometimes that support is them just getting to exist and study. So I just wanted to make that point. You know, we can't just treat students as staff as these separate entities. We need to recognise the work of people who are in both of those spaces, and sometimes decolonising the academy or decolonial work for some people is surviving and taking care of themselves and their community.
Okay. We're going to go to time.
I was going to say this quickly, sorry. Me, Ufnan, and Beatrice, I don't know where Beatrice is, we have a podcast called Stripping the White Walls, and we're at the early stages, like we've just begun it. So like if anybody, like we're going to interview Remy soon and Jason, and we've interviewed Deborah, who wrote Decolonising, the curriculum. It's just like a bridge for students and for academics, so we can just have casual discussion about the topics in the racial institution. The racial topics in the institution. But yeah, it's just a safe space for discussion. So like it's like a bridge for students and staff to come together and just to share your thoughts and opinions and just to you know. For voice to be heard. You find it. Thank you on the Decolonise UKC website, and that's where we upload our audio. We're working on uploading it on SoundCloud, Spotify, and iTunes. So have mercy upon us, but it will be on there. So bear with us. Thank you so much.
There is another panel after, so there's time for more questions. I think we have one last comment to Karen.
So I'm not sure if that helps. But I think it was just to kind of echo a bit more of I think Jason and Les's kind of energy and I think direction. I didn't feel like I had to be, explicit, but every person I quoted in my talk was Black. So somebody came up and said, you have a lot of poetry. Two are professors at prestigious universities who lead massive programs. So I'm just, you can do your work and you can practice it in a way that isn't so, it doesn't have to be explicit like that. But hopefully I've said these names. If these are names you don't know, you can now go and read them. I'm giving a reading list in the talks that I give around the UK and internationally of people can go and pick up, of books that you can go and read, of things that you can, and I think that's taking our teaching job or our job of learning for our own selves, because I have to read that work, right? And then passing that along to other sets of people and continuing to do that and not necessarily thinking about it as a curriculum activity or something about setting up a syllabus for a course. This is about transforming the narratives and the lives that we lead and our existences and trying to actually continue that cycle of that information. But I think this is a commitment to being present with it. This is what I was saying about being present. I'm present about what I put into my list. That is a conscious choice. But it's also super cool people, some who I know very well, that I want other people to be able to engage with their work. So that's a bit of excitement for me to be able to do that. And I'll just say one more thing about labor and the negotiation, and I think always being conscious and present about that, about the limitations of yourself and other people, and about that sort of collaborative practice. And it is really a practice of an awareness of your own self-worth and your own limitations and the others who are part of your collective that you bring them, because we have to care together in some ways to be able to navigate this. And I think Les's point about knowing who you can bring on your ship and who you cannot is the wisest move you can possibly make in terms of trying to kind of swim in quarters. But I mentioned the Black Studies PhD, and I'll just leave you with one thing. One of the things that we've been talking a lot as a cohort group is about our service to the community. And we've been trying and really thinking through about how to use our research knowledge and our research interests to be able to contribute to the continuation of different sets of stories. So there's two projects that we're doing right now. One is called Black at Knots. We're trying to document every single person who has identified as being of African descent at that university. So that's from cleaning staff all the way through to people who've been security, to people who've been a first student from someplace, or people who've been a staff member. And that's to recognize that at our university, the lower levels tend to be where large numbers of staff members have sat. And they will not be in those stories if it's just about staff and students. So we're trying to really recover that and use our skills in the archives to do that. And the other one is we've been working on a project to recover archives that should have stories of people, like Boots. The Boots company has a massive archive at Nottingham. And one of the things that we realized was there's a significant amount of people in Nottingham that have worked at Boots who are not in that archive, so Black people. So now we're doing a massive project to recover the oral histories of folks who have worked and produced all sorts of various different innovations for Boots and putting it back into the Boots archive. And the archivist is excited, but these are my PhD students who are doing this to contribute and give back. This is not any one person's PhD project, but this is us being able to resource this, to be able to give back a legacy, to change the way the archives and the narratives look. And that's the thing that excites me about the creativity in this room, to be able to do that kind of work.